I'm Jay Rogers. I'm the author of these two books. One of them is called In the Days of These Kings, the Book of Daniel in Preterist Perspective. And the other one is a follow-up. It's called The Prophecy of Daniel in Preterist Perspective, the Easy Parts and the Hard Parts. What I want to do in this series of videos is cover the 5 visions of Daniel, which are the prophetic portions of the book of Daniel. It's chapters 2 and then chapters 7 through 12. What are some of the parts of Daniel that everyone agrees on, and then mention the parts that people don't agree on. And that's what we're going to be covering in this series. In Daniel chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream of a large statue. And the statue has a head of gold, shoulders and arms made of silver, a lower torso of brass or bronze, and then feet and legs made of iron. Daniel interprets the dream to mean that the head of gold is Babylon. This is King Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, which will be overtaken by a kingdom of silver, which symbolizes the Medes and the Persians. The torso is the brass portion of the statue. That represents Greece and the successors of Alexander the Great. And then finally, the iron feet and legs are the Roman Empire. In the second vision, we have a similar template, except this time there are 4 beasts of the field. Daniel himself has this dream. He sees a lion, which represents Babylon. This is followed by a vision of a bear, which represents the Medes and the Persians. This is followed by a leopard, which symbolizes Greece during the time of Alexander's invasions and his successors down to the time of the Maccabean period. And then finally Rome, which is the beast of iron. Chapter 8, the Persian Empire is represented by a ram, which is defeated in battle by a goat. And the goat has a single horn. The horn represents Alexander the Great. This is broken off. 4 horns grow up in its place, which are Alexander's successors. And finally, at the end of the vision, a notable horn grows up, and this is considered to be Antiochus Epiphanes. Chapter 9 is the fun chapter of Daniel. It's the vision of the 77s, or the 490 years. And this brings us from the time of King Artaxerxes, the Persian, all the way down to the time of Christ. The Persian king at this time issued a decree to finish building the walls of Jerusalem and to finish the restoration of the temple. The decree is considered either to have taken place in either 457 BC or another decree which occurred in 444 BC. And if you count 490 years from this time, this brings us to the time of Christ. There's really not that much disagreement over this part. Some people say 444 BC, some people say 457. I'm going to argue for 457 BC, but this is a fairly straightforward prophecy from a conservative perspective. Chapter 11, the 5th vision, is a more detailed version of the 3rd vision. The Persian kings, beginning with Cyrus, and then his 4 successors, and then eventually Alexander the Great, who overtakes them, and then his successors, that are narrowed down to 2, the king of the north and the king of the south. Throughout Daniel chapter 11, the king of the north symbolizes Seleucus and his successors, the Seleucids or the Syrians, and then Ptolemy and his successors, or the Egyptians. Now this brings us to the difficult parts. The difficult parts I'll be covering in this series are Daniel chapter 2, verses 44 and 45. A lot of people want to make this about the end times, but I say clearly it represents the time of Christ. In chapter 7, we have a controversy over who are the 10 kings of chapter 7 and who's the little horn. In chapter 8, there's not too much controversy, but some people disagree over the identity of the little horn. We'll talk a little bit about why the little horn in chapter 7 refers to a Roman king, but the little horn in chapter 8 actually refers to a Syrian king named Antiochus Epiphanes. Chapter 9, as I said, is fairly straightforward until we get to verses 26 and 27. A lot of futurists want to make this about the end times and the Antichrist, while I say it's about the coming of Christ in the 1st century and the destruction of the temple in AD 70. Chapter 11, again, according to most commentaries, deals with the king of the north, the Seleucids, and the king of the south, the Ptolemies. However, when we get to Daniel 11:36, commentators are literally all over the map. And then we'll also cover chapter 12, which I consider one of the most difficult parts of the prophecy of Daniel from a preterist perspective. Now, I hope that as we do that, we'll just continue to keep this discussion going, that people will include their comments and questions, and we can answer those at a later point. But one thing I want to point out from the beginning is that eschatology is a non-essential doctrine. Whether you're a preterist, a historicist, an idealist, a futurist, whether you're premillennial, postmillennial, amillennial, all of these views fall within the realm of Christian orthodoxy. We believe that Jesus Christ, according to the creeds, will come again in glory to judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will have no end. We believe that the resurrection of the dead is something that's in the future. The only heretical view of eschatology would be one that denies the second coming of Christ, or one that says that the bodily second coming has already happened. I found it interesting that although there are literally hundreds of books that you can read on the book of Revelation and Matthew 24 from a preterist perspective, there's actually very few on Daniel. And this is something that every preterist commentator on Daniel has noted as well. Why are there so few on Daniel? Because Daniel seems to be the template for much of Matthew 24 and the book of Revelation. Isn't it backwards to study the New Testament first without going back to Daniel and trying to understand what it means? Not trying to make Daniel fit into our own preconceived ideas of what Revelation must mean and what Matthew 24 must mean. Within the realm of Christian orthodoxy, there's room for disagreement. And my purpose in this series of videos is just to keep a discussion going that people can talk about differences and ask questions. So I hope that you'll include your comments and your questions below as we go along. Thank you and God bless.